My sister held my insulin over the sink and told me to watch it disappear. You wanted attention your whole life, she said. Now you're going to feel what it's like to actually need help and not get it. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I just started doing math in my head how many hours I had left. That was 11 days ago. Yesterday, she sat in a courtroom in a gray blazer our mother picked out for her, and the judge read the charges out loud one by one. What's the cruelest thing a sibling has ever done to you? Because I used to think I knew what jealousy looked like. I was wrong. My name is Marigold Hale, everyone calls me Mari, and I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 7 years old. My sister Reagan was 12. From the day I came home from the hospital with a bag full of needles and a laminated card explaining my sick day rules, something in Reagan changed. She used to be the kid who braided my hair before school. After my diagnosis, she became the kid who timed exactly how long our parents spent checking my blood sugar versus asking about her science fair project. I want to be fair to her even now. 12 is a hard age to suddenly become the healthy, invisible one, but hard doesn't excuse what she did. It started small. She'd accidentally move my glucose meter to a different drawer right before dinner, so I'd have to go hunting for it while my hands were already shaking. She'd drink the juice boxes my mom kept in the garage fridge specifically for my low blood sugars, then act shocked when I came to her panicking, sweating, unable to find one. When I was 9, she told my whole 4th grade class that I faked being sick so teachers would let me skip tests. I spent a year being called the fake diabetic by kids who'd never even met someone with the disease. The worst early incident happened when I was 10. We were packing for a trip to my grandparents' lake house in Michigan. I'd laid my insulin pens out on my bed the night before, exactly the way my endocrinologist taught me. In the morning, they were gone. Not misplaced, gone. Reagan later admitted years afterward that she'd thrown them in a dumpster 3 streets over because she just wanted one trip where the whole family wasn't organized around my blood sugar. I ended up in the pediatric ICU, 2 states away from my regular doctor, and my parents spent the whole vacation in a hospital cafeteria instead of on a boat. And still, when I got out, my parents told me to be patient with Reagan. She's just going through something, they said. She's jealous of the attention. They had no idea how far that jealousy would eventually go. When Reagan turned 19, she was in her 2nd year at a community college by then. She announced at Sunday dinner that she'd been feeling shaky and dizzy between meals for weeks. She pulled out one of my old glucose meters, scrolled through the history, and claimed some of the erratic readings were actually from times she'd secretly tested herself. My mother had her an appointment with an endocrinologist within 2 days. Reagan started telling her friends she was probably about to get diagnosed with diabetes just like Mari. The blood work came back completely normal. Reagan insisted the doctors had missed her reactive hypoglycemia. Within a couple of weeks, she was demanding the exact same meal schedule, the exact same snack accommodations, timing her episodes to line up with my actual insulin doses. Every week brought a new dramatic collapse. Never mind that you cannot develop dangerously low blood sugar without actually injecting insulin, something Reagan wasn't doing. Logic didn't matter. She'd sway in the cereal aisle at the grocery store, tremble on the kitchen floor, demand orange juice while strangers hovered with concern. She studied me like I was a part she was auditioning for, the specific way my hands shook, the way my words slurred when I dropped too fast, the glassy look in my eyes. She copied all of it. She timed one of her worst crashes for the middle of my own high school graduation party. She went down on the patio convulsing until someone ran inside for cake. The paramedics who arrived tested her blood sugar. It was 98, perfectly normal. She told them their equipment must be broken. My parents spent what I now know was almost $11,000 on specialists, all of whom found nothing wrong with her. She joined an online support group for people with diabetes and spread misinformation to people who were actually sick. Eventually, she decided the reason she was having lows without ever injecting insulin was that she was being exposed to my times insulin just by living in the same house. She demanded her own separate mini fridge. She woke my parents at 3 in the morning claiming a dangerous crash, forcing them to make her food while I quietly handled my own real nighttime lows alone, because apparently I was expected to be the mature one. The truth finally cracked open at Thanksgiving that year. Reagan was mid-performance shaking, mumbling the whole routine when my cousin Delilah, visiting from Arizona, mentioned offhandedly that she'd seen Reagan eating an entire bag of candy in her room less than an hour earlier. Reagan froze mid-shake. My Aunt Carol, who'd been a nurse for over 20 years, grabbed Reagan's glucose meter off the counter and tested her right there in front of everyone. 96. Perfectly normal. The shaking stopped instantly. Reagan tried to claim the candy had been treatment for an earlier low. Aunt Carol tested her again 10 minutes later. Still 96. No diabetic's blood sugar sits that flat after eating a bag of candy. That night, my parents went through Reagan's room and found a journal. In her own handwriting, she documented over a year of research symptom lists, timing notes, even practice sessions in front of a mirror. She'd been faking the entire thing methodically for more than 12 months. My parents gave her 30 days to move out. She screamed that they were choosing their defective daughter over their healthy one, but for the first time in years, they didn't cave. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. It was only the beginning. The morning after Thanksgiving, I woke up to my insulin pump beeping empty, which should have been impossible since I'd changed the reservoir the night before. My backup pens, the ones I kept in the kitchen fridge, were gone. My emergency glucagon kit gone. Even the small stash I kept hidden in my sock drawer for emergencies gone. I found Reagan standing in the kitchen, holding my entire remaining insulin supply directly over the sink. "If I can't have it," she said, calm as anything, "then neither can you." She'd already dumped half of it down the disposal. Nearly $4,000 of medication gone in seconds. The rest she held over the switch, watching my face. I had maybe 6 hours before my blood sugar climbed high enough to become dangerous. It was the Friday after Thanksgiving. Every pharmacy in town was either closed or wouldn't reopen for 3 more days. My parents had left before sunrise to hit the Black Friday sales at the outlet mall 2 hours away and weren't answering their phones. The nearest hospital was 40 minutes out. Without insulin, I knew exactly where this was headed. Diabetic ketoacidosis. My blood turning acidic while my body quietly started consuming itself for fuel. "Here's what's going to happen," Reagan said, her finger resting on the disposal switch. "You're going to call Mom and Dad and tell them you coached me this whole time. That you taught me how to fake it because you wanted someone to share the attention with. You'll say you helped me plan every single episode. Or, I finish flushing this, and you get to find out what a real emergency actually feels like." I could already feel it starting: the dry mouth, the need to pee every 20 minutes, the faint nausea that I knew would turn violent within the hour. I did the math again. Without insulin, I could slip into a coma before my parents even got a signal on their phones. "Reagan, please," I started. Wrong answer. She dropped one vial into the disposal and flipped the switch. The grinding noise made me flinch forward, and she immediately raised the remaining vials like a weapon. "That's one down. You've got maybe 4 hours now instead of 6. Want to try that again?" I want to tell this part carefully because it's the part people ask me about most, and I think it's the part that matters most too. My hands were shaking, not from low blood sugar this time, but from adrenaline and rising glucose fighting each other. I thought about the landline in the living room, about my phone charging upstairs, about who I'd even call since Mom and Dad weren't picking up. The pharmacy was shuttered, and an ambulance would take at least half an hour to arrive, plenty of time for Reagan to destroy everything before they got here. "I can see you calculating," she said, stepping in front of the kitchen doorway. "There's no way out of this one. Just tell them what I need you to say, and I'll hand it back. Easy trade." My eyes flicked to the small window over the sink. Reagan noticed and pulled a knife from the block on the counter. "I'm not going to hurt you with this," she said, "but I will use it to puncture every one of these if you try to climb out that window." The nausea built steadily as she talked. She narrated my own symptoms back to me like she was reading from a textbook, because she basically was. "Your cells are starving even though there's plenty of sugar in your blood because there's no insulin to let it in. Your liver's dumping even more glucose trying to help, and that's just making it worse. In about an hour you'll start throwing up. Then the confusion. Then the fast, shallow breathing. Because your body's trying to blow off the acid building up inside you. I've seen you in this state before, remember? When I tossed your insulin before the lake trip." That memory was almost enough to make me lunge at her right then. It wasn't. Instead, I focused through the fog, starting to creep over my thoughts. "You know what I actually hated most," she went on, setting the knife down within easy reach, but keeping her eyes locked on mine. "The way everyone always asked about you first. How's Mari doing? Did she have a low today times, like I didn't exist except in relation to your disease?" I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell her that none of this, the appointments, the fear, the 3 a.m. blood sugar checks, was something I had asked for or wanted. But my tongue felt thick and the words wouldn't line up right anymore. She pressed a glass of water toward me eventually, almost like an experiment, watching me drink it and then watching the thirst return within minutes anyway. She recorded video on her phone at one point, coaching me through a scripted confession, but by then my speech had started slurring badly enough that even she could tell it wouldn't be convincing to anyone. She tried getting me to sign a written version instead. The pen fell out of my hand twice. That's when the doorbell rang. Our next-door neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, a retired school nurse in her 70s, who'd lived next to us for over 20 years, had noticed the delivery driver leave in a hurry, noticed my parents' car was gone, and decided to check on us with a plate of leftover. Reagan panicked, shoved the vials into her hoodie pocket, and pointed the knife at me as a silent warning before answering the door with a voice that came out too high and too fast. Mrs. Alvarez wasn't fooled for a second. She'd spent 30 years reading kids' faces for exactly this kind of trouble. She asked to see me. Reagan made excuses. I heard the suspicion climbing in Mrs. Alvarez's voice through the door. I knocked a glass off the counter on purpose. It shattered on the tile. Mrs. Alvarez's voice sharpened immediately, and she said she was calling 911 if the door didn't open all the way right now. Reagan cornered, pulled me up, and half dragged me to the door with her hissing a final threat in my ear. When the door opened, Mrs. Alvarez's eyes went straight to my face, pale, sweating, breathing wrong, and I watched 2 decades of nursing instinct click into place behind her eyes. I asked her in a voice barely above a whisper if she still had that peppermint tea from her garden. I hate peppermint tea. She knows I hate peppermint tea. She'd known me since I was 5 years old. Of course, honey, she said smoothly. I'll be right back. She wasn't gone 5 minutes before I heard sirens. Reagan tried to run out the back when the lights hit the windows, but there was nowhere to go. Paramedics found me on the kitchen floor, weak but conscious, surrounded by broken glass and empty vial casings. The knife was still on the counter. The video on Reagan's own phone, the one she'd recorded to force a confession, became the clearest evidence against her. I spent 2 days in the hospital rebuilding what her jealousy had tried to take from me. My parents sat by my bed in a silence I'd never heard from them before, somewhere between guilt and disbelief. They told me eventually that they'd found Reagan's diary months earlier and dismissed it as teenage drama. They'd had warning signs for over a year and chosen comfort over confrontation. Reagan was charged with reckless endangerment and destruction of property. The value of the destroyed insulin alone was enough to make it a felony. She's out on bail now, staying with a friend across town, a restraining order keeping her away from our house. Yesterday was her first court appearance. I sat 2 rows behind the prosecutor and watched her cry while the charges were read out loud, and I felt less satisfaction than I expected to. Mostly I just felt tired, and a little bit sad for the sister I used to have before all of this. If there's a lesson in any of this, it's not really about diabetes. It's about what happens when a family mistakes silence for peace. My parents loved both of us, but for years they chose to smooth things over instead of naming what Reagan was actually doing, and that choice almost cost me my life on a kitchen floor the day after Thanksgiving. I still lock my insulin in a small safe in my closet. I still wake up some nights just to check that it's there. Recovery isn't a single moment, it's 100 small, boring mornings where nothing bad happens, stacked one on top of the other until you start to believe you're safe again. If you're dealing with a sibling who resents you for something you never asked for, an illness, an accommodation, an accident of biology, please don't wait for a Thanksgiving dinner or a kitchen floor to make your family finally listen. Say something sooner than I did. Ask for help sooner than my parents did. That's my story. If you made it this far, I'd love to hear about the wildest thing a brother or sister has ever put you through. Drop it in the comments, I read every single one.